Cal Brennan put $7 on the auctioneer's table and stood still while the whole Silverpine sale barn turned to look at him. The bidding had already died. Nobody wanted the dun mare with the bowed tendon and the gray muzzle and the way of standing at the back of the pen like she had stopped believing there were any hands in the world worth walking toward. She was 14 if she was a day. A remount brand on her left shoulder had been cold-branded so deep it puckered the hair. The auctioneer called her Cinder. The men leaning against the rails called her Cripple. Cal pushed his hat back and watched the mare. She did not flatten her ears. She did not swing her head away. She simply looked at him with the patient, tired attention of an animal that had decided to wait one more hour before giving up entirely. $12 would have been robbery. $7 was the kind of price a man pays to be remembered for buying trash. Cal paid it. He led Cinder out the back gate while a man in a store-bought coat named Landry stood on the gallery above and watched. Landry owned the biggest spread south of the rim. He owned half the water rights in Salt Creek. He needed Cal Brennan's 80 acres because the spring on those acres ran cleanest in dry years, and a man does not become the biggest in a territory by letting clean water sit in another man's trough. Cal had been a schoolteacher once in Taos. He had come north to breed saddle horses for the army and lost his wife Marta to the lung fever of '79 and lost his son Nate not to death but to the slower injury of misunderstanding. Nate lived in Trinidad working a freight office, writing letters that said almost nothing. Cal blamed himself. He blamed the silence mostly. His place sat where the willows grew thick along the creek. The adobe house had a sag in the roof that needed a new sill beam. Cal's left knee announced weather 2 days early and the roof would wait. There was a smokehouse, a coop with 3 hens, a barn with 7 empty stalls. The dun mare walked in beside him and stood at the stall nearest the alley door and did not move until he brought her a flake of hay. 2 questions circled in his chest before he had paid the man. Why had she walked through that sale ring like she had somewhere to be and didn't want anyone to see her? And where had the remount brand taken her? Her back carried the bowed mark of long service on broken ground. He ran his hand down her neck that night and she lowered her head a 1/4 inch and he took the 1/4 inch like a man takes a letter slipped under a door. If you are somewhere out there this evening listening while you cook or mend or wind down before bed, you are in good company. Tell me where you are listening from. I'm always glad to know who has come by. The first week Cal did not ride her. He cleaned her hooves. He packed the bowed tendon with witch hazel and pine pitch in a coffee tin on the porch. He checked the spring, running strong because the runoff had been good. He watched Landry's men move steers up the lane and not one tipped his hat. On Friday a buyer from town said Cal was a fool to take on the cripple mare. Cal said, "I didn't take her on, I just bought her," and the buyer laughed his tobacco laugh and drove on. On the 9th day he saddled her. Cinder walked out the gate and took the trail north along the creek as if she'd been reading a map. The bowed leg carried her like it had learned its own weather. Cal let her go. They climbed through scrub oak to a saddle where the land opened onto the upper mesa. 2 riders passed him coming back. One of them Landry's nephew Toby, who pulled up long enough to say Landry was looking to file on the spring, and Cal could either sell clean or cause trouble, and then there would be paperwork. Cal touched his hat brim and rode on. Cinder stopped at the rim and trembled once along her whole top line. Cal sat still. Below them, 2,000 feet down through folded red rock, ran Salt Creek Canyon. It had been 20 years since anyone had come up that canyon alive. The old soldiers had called it Lost Washington. The U.S. Army had lost a remount string in it during the long winter of '78. Cal looked at the brand on Cinder's shoulder and his stomach went cold. She had been one of those horses. She had come up out of there, and she had not forgotten the way. That night Cal walked down to the kitchen and sat with his coffee. The bowed mare walked the fence line in the moonlight, slow, looking north toward the canyon. If a horse can be homesick for a country that almost killed her, he thought, then what is it that I am homesick for? And the answer came back as a question, not as a name, because the answer to homesickness is never a place. It is the moment you decide whether you still want to look for what you lost. In the morning Cal was waiting at Landry's gate with his hat in his hand. Cal did not wait for an invitation. He took his hat off at the gate because that was how his mother had taught him and because the world had lost enough manners without him adding to it. The hired girl brought him coffee. He waited. Landry came in from the back with the foreman Toby and sat down with the slow comfort of a man who owned his chair and intended to inherit yours. Cal asked him straight. He asked had Rourke ever lost a daughter he hadn't sent for. Landry's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He said Hettie had been dead 5 years. He said there had been a storm and she had gone walking toward the canyon and his men had dragged the rim for 3 weeks and found nothing. He said it the way a man says a thing he has practiced saying in public. Cal watched him and thought, that is the way a man says a thing he has not looked at in private. There was a pinto mare that year, Cal said. The remount brand on her shoulder meant she had been in the canyon in '78. There is a way up Lost Wash if a horse knows it. Landry set his cup down. He said, what are you asking me for? Cal said, I am asking you if you still want her back. The room got quiet. The hired girl stopped in the doorway. Landry said, what would you take to go look? The price Cal could name was the price of his spring and his ranch and his name being forgotten. He could name a number and walk out with money and never climb down into Lost Wash again. He could spend the rest of his life drinking coffee with the man who had taken his water. Cal thought about the sag in the roof. He thought about his son in Trinidad who had stopped calling him Pa. He opened his mouth. He named a smaller number than Landry had been ready to give. He said he would not sell the spring. He said he would go on his own mare. Landry raised an eyebrow. Cal said, what is it worth to a father? And the question was not rhetorical. Toby laughed a little and said Cal was a fool. Landry looked at Cal for a long time, and then he nodded once, and Cal stood up and walked out before the gratitude could land on him like a hand on his chest. The whole town heard about it before supper. Cal's neighbor Delbert Mackey came over in his Sunday shirt. Delbert said Rourke Landry had bought the Brock place and the Vickers place and was moving on Cal's north fence. Delbert said, do not go up into that canyon. Delbert said, you lost Marta. You lost Nate. Do not go up there to find nothing. Cal said, what if it is not nothing? Delbert said, what if it is? Let me ask you something. What would you have done in that kitchen with Landry? Would you have taken the money and walked out? Or would you have said what was true and gone down into the canyon on the dun mare? I don't ask because I want to be clever. I ask because there is a moment in everyone's life when the safe thing and the right thing are not the same. What Cal did not say to anyone, not even to Delbert, was that he had been asking whether the dun mare had been turned loose on purpose. He had been asking whether you can really rescue someone your whole life has been preparing you to overlook. These were not questions he had words for. They were the kind of questions that lived in the bones of a man. He saddled Cinder on a Thursday in early June. Delbert met him at the rim with flour and peaches and a leather pocketbook he had inherited from his grandfather. He said, take this. Cal said, why would you give me your grandfather's pocketbook? Delbert said, because the man who carried it never came home from anything he walked into alone. The harder choice landed. The other men in town did not come. Some said Cal had lost his mind. Some said he was going for the money and would come down rich. Rourke Landry's men stopped waving when they passed. There was no violence. There was the slow silence of a community that had decided, very politely, not to be present when the next bad thing happened. The only one who still waved was a girl of about 8 who ran messages between town and the ranches, and she waved both arms at Cal from the road, and Cal waved back, and that was the moment he understood that the people watching him go also had to live with watching him not come back. He went on down the canyon wall that morning, Cal and the dun mare, with the sun already climbing the rim. He did not go alone because he felt brave. He went because the bowed mare walked like she had done it before. Lost Wash was what the old soldiers had called a donut hole. The rock folded back on itself in loops. From the saddle Cinder picked her way down through the loose scree, single file, putting each hoof in the place a smarter horse had once put its hoof 22 years before. She did not hesitate once. 3 hours down they came to a seep. It came out of the wall in a thread so thin you had to put your ear to the rock to hear it. Cal knelt. He drank. Cinder drank. He sat back on his heels and laughed, because for 20 years people had said Lost Wash was impassable, and it was not impassable. It was just the kind of country that refused to be hurried. They went on. The canyon forked. Cal pulled out the county map and tried to make sense of where they were. The map was wrong. He folded it up and rode by the mare's eye. The walls went orange. They came to a flat shelf under an overhang. On the shelf there was the remains of a campfire, a charred hoop of willow, a tin plate without a handle, pinions split into lengths too careful to be casual. Someone had been living there. The hair on Cal's forearms stood up. Cinder's ears came forward. She nickered once, very low, and the canyon threw the sound back twice. A voice from above. "You are welcome to the water. Do not come closer." Cal looked up. A young woman stood on the ledge 10 feet above his head. She had a rifle in her hands. She had the kind of steady that is not learned from books. She was older than the missing poster in the post office would have suggested, but she had the same parted hair and the same squared shoulders, and her father was the richest man south of the rim, and she was alive. Cal felt the canyon floor shift under him. He took his hat off. He said, "Miss Landry." She said, "Do not call me that." He said, "Then what do I call you?" She said, "You call me Hettie. Don't come a step closer until you tell me why you are here and who sent you." If he said his father sent me, she would shoot. If he said nobody sent me, she would shoot, because no man comes down Lost Wash without a boss. He sat very still on the dun mare and let the mare decide for him. He said, "The mare brought me." Hettie lowered the rifle by an inch. She said, "What mare?" He said, "The dun mare I am sitting on." Hettie looked at the mare. The mare looked at Hettie. The mare nickered again, deeper this time, and Hettie's face did something Cal did not expect. It broke. The rifle came down. She said, "That was Bay's full. I raised her from a bottle. They took her in 78 and my father never went after her." Cal said nothing. She said, "My father looked for me for 3 weeks because 3 weeks was long enough to look like a man." Cal said, "You came down here when you were 18. She said, "I came down here because I knew what was waiting for me at the top. Now tell me who sent you." Cal said, "I will tell you what sent me. The mare sent me. Your father has the money to send 100 men. He sent none of them. The mare sent me because she knows the way and because I bought her for $7 at a sale ring yesterday, and I think that is a thing you will understand." Hettie looked at him again. The canyon went quiet. She said, "If she brought you, then sit down. If I find out you are lying, I will leave before morning and you will never catch me." Cal stepped down. He said, "I am not here to bring you back. I am here to give you the choice." The new question was the one he had not known to ask until he saw her. What does a man do when he finds out that the thing he was looking for is no longer the thing that needs to be found? Cinder walked to Hettie and laid her nose along Hettie's forearm, and Hettie put her face against the mare's neck and did not move for a long time. Hettie did not weep. She had forgotten how. She had been saving the small of her back for firewood and the soles of her feet for canyon stone. She sat on the shelf with one hand on Cinder's neck and the rifle across her knees, not because she needed it anymore, but because she did not know where else to put it. Cal took the saddle off. He unpacked Delbert's flour and peaches and the flask and the leather pocketbook. He said, "You eat the peaches. I will make coffee. You do not have to talk." She said, "My father will offer you the spring." Cal said, "Yes." She said, "My father will offer you money." Cal said, "Yes." She said, "My father will offer you Toby." Cal said, "What does that mean?" She said, "It means my father is going to try to turn this into what was owed to him. Don't take it. I am not something to be owed." He poured the coffee. He said, "I will bring you a letter of what happened. I will bring you back nothing to him but the truth." Hettie looked at him. She said, "You will also bring nothing about me. I decide how this goes. Not you. Not him." Cal said, "Agreed." She said also, "Don't tell him what canyon I am in." Cal nodded. He understood why. A father who had not come looking was not a father to be given a map. Now they ate in the way two people eat when neither of them wants the other to see how hungry they have been. Cinder stood with her head on Hettie's shoulder. Hettie said, "The mare's dam was a cavalry horse named Bay. Her sire was a stallion called Gray Storm. This one was the last filly that came out of the canyon." Cal said, "What was her name?" Hettie said, "They called her Feather." Cal said nothing. Cal said, "When my wife died, I put her wedding ring in a coffee tin on the porch. I did not tell my son. I went out one morning and the ring had rolled under the porch and I never found it." She said nothing. He said, The thing I lost is not the ring. The thing I lost is the man who would have looked at it. The canyon held still. Hettie said, "You have a son." Cal said, "I do. He has not called me Pa in 2 years. I blame the silence mostly." She said, "My father sent his silence down this canyon to keep me out here." He said, "Yes." She said, "Are you going to send yours up the canyon?" Cal said, "No. If you have been listening tonight and there is someone you have not called in too long, you are not alone. We are all about to do the same. Drop a comment if you have made the call." He passed her the pocketbook. He said, "This is from Delbert. He said the man who carried this never came home alone. I am giving it to you because I would like you to know that one is." Hettie took it. Inside was a folded letter from Delbert's grandfather written in 1849. "If you are reading this, I did not come home. I was not afraid. I went because the country needed someone to walk into it." Hettie folded it up. She said, "When I come out, I want to be the one who hands it back to Delbert." Cal said, "You do not have to come out." She said, "I know. The point is the choice. The moment of restraint." Cal could have asked her to come out now, today, while her father's nerve was on the floor. He could have pressed the advantage of the peach syrup and the morning. He did not. He said, "I will come back in a week with salt and a knife and boots. If you decide by the 3rd week, I will come down anyway, until you tell me not to." Hettie said, "I want you to keep going." He said, "What?" She said, "I want you to keep going." He understood. She was asking him not to stop being the kind of man who showed up. She was not asking him to come back. Cinder did not follow him up the canyon wall that afternoon. Cal walked back alone with the empty saddle and a pocketbook that was no longer in his pocket. He had paid $7 at a sale ring and he had paid some more here. On the 3rd day up the wall he sat at the rim and cried. Not because of the mare, not because of the canyon, not because of Hettie, but because he had remembered that the thing you love does not have to be carried. Sometimes it stands still and lets you. Cal walked down off the rim at sundown. He put the saddle in the barn. He sat on the porch with his boots still on and he wrote a letter to his son. "Nate, I went down into Lost Washington. I did not go alone. I went with a mare I paid $7 for and I came back alone. I did not come back the man I left. I came back your father." He walked the letter into town in the morning. He did not stop at Landry's. The gate stayed quiet because Cal had stopped being the kind of man a gate had things to say to. Delbert told him what had happened while he had been gone. Toby had come by on Tuesday, not to take the spring, but to ask where Cal was. Delbert told him. Delbert said Rourke Landry had canceled the filing at the land office the same hour and wanted to know if the dun mare had come back. Cal said, "The dun mare is not mine anymore. I am returning her." Delbert came back an hour later with stamp money and the only bottle of good whiskey in town. He said, "I am not a man who ever had a daughter. Don't refuse me." Cal wrote 3 lines to Rourke Landry on a page torn from a schoolbook. "Your daughter is alive. She is well. She has chosen where she is. I will not say where. Your silence, sir, has been heard." He sealed it. The girl who had waved him goodbye brought the reply. Rourke read the letter and did not speak for 2 hours. He did not cry. He did not shout. He simply stood at the window and watched the rim. The runoff was good. The spring ran clean. Cal mended the south fence. He sat on the porch in the evenings and watched the canyon open at the bottom of the meadow. He received a letter from Trinidad in the 2nd week. The letter said, "Pa, I read your letter. I want to come home. I am not the man I was when I left. Tell the roof I am coming up." It was the first letter Nate had signed that way in 6 years. Cal did not file on his water. He let the spring run. He did not file against his neighbor. The country gave back what he carried into it. Cal rode out the next morning on a bay gelding and dropped a small bundle addressed only. Salt Creek Canyon. Hettie. Inside was salt, a knife, a pair of boots, and a slip that said, "When I find out where you sleep when it rains, I will not tell him. But I will keep going." See, he climbed down every 3rd week. He carried what she asked him to carry. He did not bring news of her to her father. He did not bring news of her to the town. The town nodded and walked on. Smaller news is harder to carry than big news. Smaller news is the kind of news that walks into a kitchen and sits down. Landry did not go down. He did not come down because his pride was the size of his spread and his pride would not fit in a canyon. He died in the winter of '83 with his boots on in the dining room and his coffee cold. The country does not give back what a man did not carry into it. Nate came home on a bay gelding with a flatbed wagon and a new sill beam for the roof. He climbed down and looked at his father. He said, "Pa, I am not the man I was. I am here to mend your roof." Cal said, "The roof has been waiting." The next week Cal climbed down too. Cinder nickered and walked him on a further trail to a place where the canyon opened onto a small stream he had not seen. There was a woman standing at the stream with a young boy on her hip. Hettie had walked out on her own terms and come back on her own terms because Hettie Landry had decided even a canyon has no claim on a woman who knows how to come home. Cinder walked to the boy and the boy put his hand on the mare's nose. Cal said, "Are you all right?" She said, "I am well. And this is my son." Cal said, "What is his name?" She said, "Feather. If you walk into a country for the right reason, the country will tell you the name of the thing you came to find, and most days the name will be smaller than you hoped, and most days that is the only kindness the country knows how to give." On the porch at sundown, Cal Brennan watched the rim of Salt Creek Canyon with his granddaughter asleep on his knee, and the light came around the rim the color of a dun mare at evening, and old Cinder came up the lane with a younger mare beside her and stood at the bottom of the porch steps and put her nose on the old man's knee. "If you would like to come with us again next week, we are going to spend an evening in a small town on the Montana line where a man wagered his best saddle horse on a stranger's wedding and lost, and then won, in the strangest way a man ever won anything. Until then, take care of the people at your table. Tell them you love them while the lamp is on. I will see you soon."